I don't know how many times I'm going to keep seeing this, but I'm going to keep saying it over and over again until I guess people finally get the idea. Now that your boy's voice is back and I actually look presentable, we could make a little discussion before we go to locals. Let's dive on into it, shall we? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is your host with the most, Avery LR32 here, and destroy the ever-living sickness boo-boo stain, because I was sick for about a week and change. As we climb even higher the 1500 ladder, I really do appreciate all of the love and support. So I saw this video from Team APS, and I don't have a problem with Team APS. I just think that a lot of the things he talks about is from a more casual perspective. And so I find it difficult for me to relate to a lot of his content. And one of the things he was talking about was like the mid-core Yu-Gi-Oh player, which to me, when watching him talk about that, I feel like the whole argument came down to actually something that I talked about with another YouTuber who actually got ousted and like no longer has a channel. I don't even remember their name, but I remember I pronounced their name like totally wrong. But that is about like Team APS didn't talk about, but the other person who used to be a YouTuber did, talking about custom formats and hitting certain cards so that the format's more diverse and things like that. And Team APS kind of talked about that with like the mid-core Yu-Gi-Oh player, where essentially what I feel like it boiled down to at least is the mid-core Yu-Gi-Oh player who's not too serious but not super casual, but something in the middle, and it's hard for them to find a deck to play because they feel that they're so outpriced. Here's the thing. Yes, number one, we are in a very pricey format between the 6 Mulch Armies, soon to be 9 copies in total if you want to play the new Mulch Army. If you want to play 3 of each, but that's like way too much. But we're going to get a 3rd Mulch Army soon. That's going to probably be expensive. Not as expensive as Perulia and Fualos. Even Fualos is now down to like $80 that I was checking earlier today as of January 16th. It was down to about 80, 85 on TCG Player. And so between the Mulch Armies, between the Fiendsmith cards, and if you want to play Rizal, even the Rizal cards, it becomes very difficult to build a deck on a budget. Now, we have seen certain rogue decks do well. Like, hell, a stun deck just made top 16 out of a 500-plus man regional. That is insane. Like, we're talking Fossil Dynas, played Super Polys in the main, like the whole 9, right? That's insane. That is a really good showing for a rogue deck. Just a stun deck in general. People are like, oh, stun's dead because Jowgen's banned. No, it's not, pimp. That deck is surprisingly really good. Even when I tested against my dad with his stun deck, even though he doesn't really know what a lot of the new cards do because he plays too much Master Shits, which we've talked about before. But he knows how to summon a Fossil Dyna and set back row, and sometimes that's just enough. It also doesn't help him that he played Mystic Mind for 4 years, so 4 years of Yu-Gi-Oh! Got away from him. But besides the point, it was a good showing for stun. We just also, that I saw Yugioh talking about, a Dinomorphia deck won a couple of regionals, and that's a really good budget deck. Like, you can get away with not playing Mulch Armies in some of these rogue decks like Stun, which didn't play any Mulch Armies, and I think the Dinomorphia list that Yugioh showed didn't have Mulch Armies either. So it's not like you have to play Mulch Armies. Like, they're obviously really good, but like, you don't have to play these cards, right? So you have these different options available to you. And one of the things that I talked about with that previous video a couple years ago with that previous YouTuber, one of the things I said when making custom formats, and I remember saying it this way, and I quote, "No Yu-Gi-Oh deck is created evenly." And I made that a point in the video because of the fact that people bitch and whine and crap all over the venue floor, whining about like how decks aren't diverse and there aren't enough different decks in the format. And it's like, and they also complain about like how one deck reigns supreme. And it's like, even in a diverse format, there is usually a consensus on what is considered the quote-unquote best deck or most represented deck. Like, I remember everybody was going based off of the most represented decks after Top Cut in YCS when they used to have to do draft for like the top 32 or whatever it was, which was a really dumbassery idea. And so even when you look at old formats like Hat and Edison, what have you, more Hat and like, not even really Dragon Ruler format because that was a tier 0 format, but any of these other diverse formats that have lasted a while, because Edison was a very short time frame. you can see like what was considered overall the best decks. Even in toss format, it's pretty much agreed upon, which I do have a Yu-Gi-Oh! Retrospective for that format coming along. I just need to record it. I'm finally getting my voice back. But even in toss format, it's pretty much agreed upon that any deck that can play Thunder Dragon Colossus is going to be one of the best decks in the room, because Colossus is just a fucking god card in that format, right? Like, that's why it was originally banned. It was a Thunder King that had destruction protection. Like, that's insane. And so now, even if like we're in this now current format and we had like 5 other decks to pick from, which I would kind of argue you do, that were on equal power level as Malice and Rizal, like if they wanted it to be that diverse, number one, that's just not possible. Number two, there is still overall going to be a deck that is considered the best deck. That's never going away. Even if Rizal and Malice won, let's say, an equal number of YCSs before we get another ban list, I think the majority of people are going to agree that Rizal is just the better deck, because its overall matchup against Malice is better than Malice versus Rizal, if that makes sense. Excuse me. And so there's never going to be a format where it's just all diversity. Like, yes, there are formats like Hat where you can look at like top 32 finishes of YCSs and they're pretty diverse for the most part. But to go into a YCS and have the top 32 be 32 unique decks and not like, say, first place is Rizal Fiendsmith and second place is Mitsurugi Rizal. No, like 32 unique decks, like one Rizal, one pure Mitsurugi deck, one Malice deck, one branded deck. Like, the odds of that happening in today's day and age is very slim to none, because there's so many good generic engines in the game right now, whether it's Fiendsmith, the Azamina Wanted engine with Diabellstar and all that, and now Rizal cards, or even Malice, whatever. There's going to be all these engines now, as my phone decides to go off, that it just doesn't make it possible for 32 different decks in a top 32 of a big event like a YCS to happen. Could it happen down the line? Sure. Should it happen more often? Yeah, give the player base some choices. But I would also argue in a format like this, where it's not just break my board anymore, thank God, because it feels like the game's been like that for years. If you build your deck correctly, and if you study the format enough, you can get away with seeing success, such as getting top 16 at a fucking regional with stun, with fossil dynas and super polys, crackdowns, solemns, karma cannons if you want. Like, bro, you've got these options available to you. You just gotta fucking study up. Like, I'm not going to go into YCS Orlando not knowing what Malice does, because that's my own damn fault, and I'm still trying to learn completely how that deck functions. But I know that if you Ghost Bell the field spell, that's really good. So, I don't know how many times I'm going to fucking say it, but I guess I'm going to keep on saying it. There's nothing wrong also with being a mid-core Yu-Gi-Oh player. Like, everybody has to start from somewhere. It's different when you realize you're that, and you want to be more competitive, but then you get all upsetty spaghetti when someone like me tells you how it is, and then you get upset because you're like, oh, well, I don't want to be a meta sheep, and I don't want to play that, I want to play this, and blah, 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 blah. Perfect example. I have a buddy, good friend of mine, really cool dude, but even he has identified, like, hey, Avery, I'm a casual player. So, like, there was one time where he wanted me to work on his Mech Knight Crawler deck. I'm looking at it, and I'm like, well, first of all, you're only playing 2 hand traps and a 50-card pile. You need to completely gut this thing and gut out the crawlers. Boom, 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 boom. Here's how you can make it most competitively viable. He's like, okay, well, I appreciate it, but I want to be as competitively viable as I can playing the Mech Knight and Crawler cards. I'm like, oh, you're fucked. There's no shot that you're going to do well with that. Oh, well, I can OTK if I open this, this, and this, and I don't get hand trapped. And I'm like, you're going to get hand trapped. We're in a 15 plus hand trap format right now. We're always going to be like 15 plus now at this point. I think the bare minimum of hand traps we're going to see for the next few years is going to be like 15 plus. Like, the lowest is going to be 15. Anything less than that, you better be playing some board breakers or something like Droplets, Chalice, Eclipse, whatever, because that's just going to be too low. Even 12 now just seems too low. And so at first he got kind of aggravated because he's like, that just, to me, I want to be competitive, but like, that's not being competitive, that's just being a meta sheep. And I'm like, that's modern Yu-Gi-Oh, pimp. You can play that for locals and maybe see some success if you deck build correctly and really understand the format. But if you're trying to top 8 a regional with a Mech Knight Crawler deck with 2 hand traps and it's like a 60 card pile, you're not going to get there, man. Like, maybe you get on a streak, but to go 9 rounds and just OTK every single person you play, it's not going to happen. It's unfortunate that you can't play your favorite deck or your pet deck in a scenario like that, but that's just how Yu-Gi-Oh is. You know, people say, oh, well, it's because of power creep took over the game. I agree. Power creep has been an issue, especially with Snake Eyes format. Just look at the last 2 formats and how toxic the game was. But do you really think the game would still be around for 25 years if the game was still like GOAT format? I think everybody can agree the game would not still be fucking around. Like, it's a fun format. It's really cool. I never played in that format. I was too young. I wasn't playing competitively then. But it's a fun format to go back to. But I think it's just because of the fact people are tired of power creep, which rightfully so. And I'm even tired of the mulch armies. But the format's great right now. We have decent deck diversity. Again, when you can make top 16 at a 500 plus man regional with a stun deck, and you can win a regional with a Dinomorphia deck, the format doesn't get any better than that. Guys, let me know what you think down in the comments below of this video. Let me know what you think. Thank you all so much for watching. It feels good to be feeling better, and I'll see you in the next video. And if I do well at locals tonight, I'll be sure to do a deck profile. Spoiler alert, we're playing Fiendsmith Rise All, but we've got some spicy techs.